All right, let me tell you the single biggest problem with trying to run a review channel on YouTube. People want reviews for gear the instant it comes out. And there's two major roadblocks to being able to give that to people. Number one is access to gear. Obviously, we don't have an infinite budget, so I can't buy every single product as soon as it comes out. Typically, I get my product through one of two ways. I do end up buying it, or I end up from borrowing it from friends or members at mine for reviews who have already purchased it. Now, I am starting to develop some relationship with brands, so sometimes I can get my hands on gear, but also there's bottlenecks in that system as well, so sometimes that can be problematic, even if you have a relationship. But that problem is pretty solvable. The problem that's not solvable is, and I've done this before, I've released a review too early. Like, I have not appropriately put a product through its paces before releasing my conclusion or my advice in regards to that product, and it's bit me in the ass before. And so I want to propose a solution. From now on, I'm going to do 3 different types of reviews. The first type of review is going to be called an initial impression review. That's what we're here to do today. Now, that review will be my, exactly what it says, initial impressions of a product. And it's basically like, as soon as that I put it in my hands, I've been lucky enough to look at a lot of products intuitively. Once I have a look at it, I can kind of come to some basic conclusions about who this product might be suitable for. I can call out some of its like early like pros and cons, like things that just leap out to me as kind of like noteworthy items. I can tell you where it sits in the marketplace against other comparable items, and just give you my initial impressions so that if you are one of those people who wants to run out and buy something brand new, at least you can have my first thoughts about the product. Like if I think it's just a total winner or a total loser, maybe that can influence your opinion in some regard. But I don't want that to be confused with the second level of review, which we're going to call a field tested review. So this is when I've had access to a product for at least 3 to 6 months. I've had the ability to either take it on a couple of hunts or run it through extensive testing here at home. And I feel very confident that the conclusions I've come to are based on my experience with the product. And it's kind of like that next level of confidence I've got. So I can really tell you what my experience has been with this product, who I think it might fit, and whether or not I think it's worth spending your money on. Now, the third phase, we're going to call like a longitudinal or long-term review. Because no matter how thorough I am with that second phase of field-tested review, this third phase, I've got stuff now that I've been using for like 2, 3, 4 years, and I feel differently about it now than I did at 2 months and 4 months and 6 months when I would have released my initial reviews. However, obviously I can't use every product for 3 or 4 years before I release a review, because the product usually becomes obsolete by then because of this crazy, consumer-based economy we live in where people are coming out with new versions of everything every 1 to 3 years. So, initial impressions, field tested, and long term. So at the beginning of each review from now on, I'm going to tell you which of those categories it fits in, and then that will enable me to get reviews out to market quicker with newer products while still maintaining the integrity of the channel and the depth of technical analysis that I'm known for and that I love. Like, that's what I love. I don't love unboxings. I don't love 8-minute videos. I don't love reading you marketing spec sheet bullshit. I love playing with products for hours and weeks and months and then giving you like deep insights and analysis about the product. That's field tested. And then there's long term, which you can almost consider an update to the field tested with anything that I've noted after multiple years of use. So that brings us to the Kowa TSN-55A Spotting Scope. This is a brand new spotting scope There was an embargo on this that only got lifted on June 10th. So even though I had access to it before then, I wasn't allowed to talk about it before then. They were taking pre-orders, and I think it just shipped to dealers on June the 30th. So you should be able to put your hands on this now. Now, this is a significant upgrade to the 55-3. It still uses the same fluorite crystal as the 553. And one thing to note, because I hear people, and I got called out on this as well. So I'll just say, fluorite crystal is not glass. You have fluorite containing glass, like used in Swarovski, used in Zeiss, and typically the more fluorite in glass correlates to a higher clarity and a better quality of glass. And then you have like HD glass or ED glass, extra low dispersion or high definition glass that may or may not have any fluorite in it at all, which can still be of decent quality. Then you have Kowa. Kowa is the only manufacturer on the market that uses lab-grown fluorite crystal grown in Japan. It's not glass, it's crystal. In my opinion, and I'm not the only one who has this opinion, Kowa has the highest quality crystal, or the crystal in Kowa spotting scopes is of superior quality to all of the rest of the glass on the market. Obviously, the big three, Swaro, Leica, and Zeiss, are very, very, very close behind. But I think if you really analyzed this with like the highest machinery that you possibly could, you would see that the Kowa crystal still comes out, single digit percentage points. I don't know if it's 1%, 3%, 5%, but just a little bit better than even that alpha glass. The problem is that Kowa has some failings that those other systems don't. And so typically the question you're asking yourself when you're considering a Kowa spotting scopes is the superior, we're going to use the term glass just because for ease of understanding, but is the superior glass in the Kowa worth some of the like ergonomic and functionality trade-offs that you don't have to deal with in the other units? So what is new about this one? The biggest thing that has changed is the integrated eyepiece. So this has the 17 to 40x eyepiece. It has a 55 millimeter objective, as obviously indicated by the model number, the 55A. But most, in the past, Kowa spotting scopes have had detachable eyepieces. This one's now integrated. However, the form factor is still the same as the 66, the 88, the 99, like everything else in this TSN line. So if you have a digiscoping adapter for any of those other models, it is going to still fit directly on this one. So that's really good news. You don't have to go out and buy a new spotting scope adapter. Not a big deal, but they did include a cord on the eyepiece cover this time. Comes with an objective cover. Now, unfortunately, Kowa has still not moved to an ARCA Swiss compliant plate, so you still need to use an adapter on the bottom, which is kind of a pain in the butt. I really wish everyone would just get on the ARCA train. That's one of the things I love about the Swaro ATX and the ATC, is that it comes with just an ARCA plate on the bottom. I mean, you're going to have this here anyways. Why not just make it ARCA compliant? You're not losing any functionality whatsoever. And then for people with ARCA-based systems, you're literally just sliding it right onto your tripod. And I love not having like an extra 1/2-inch adapter hanging off the bottom of my scope. Now, as far as price point, where does this sit? So the Kowa retails for $22.99. The most comparable spotting scope to this would be the Swaro ATC, and it retails for $25.69. So basically, it is $270 less than the Swaro, or about, let's call it 15% cheaper. So I pulled up the comparable specs, and what we're going to do is we're going to look at categories with the TSN-55A, the TSN-553, and then the Swaro ATC. So the objective diameter is obviously 55 in both the Kowas, 56 and the Swaro, so you do get an extra mil of light gathering capability. The new 55A, as I mentioned, goes 17 to 40 magnification. The old 55.3 only went 15. The old 55.3 went 15 to 45, and then the Swaro ATC goes 17 to 40, exactly the same as the Kowa does. Now, incredibly important figure, field of view at 1,000 yards.
All right, guys, so I had to jump in with a quick update here because the original specs for field of view that I was given for the Kowa Spotting Scope were incorrect. So the updated specs for the field of view for the Kowa TSN-55A is 192 feet at 17 power at 1,000 yards and 105 feet at 40 power at 1,000 yards. Now the 553 was 144 feet and 75 feet. So that is a huge improvement over the last iteration. And the Swaro ATC is 203.4 feet at 17 power and 111.6 feet at 40 power. So the Swaro has about a 5% greater field of view across the entire zoom range. So while that's a data point that I certainly think we want to pay attention to, it's not a deal breaker by any stretch of the imagination.
Now, weight is significantly important. The 55A comes in at 33.86 ounces, so it's gone up in weight. The 55.3 came in at 28.57 ounces, and the Swaro clocks in at 35.8 ounces. So this to me is of significant importance, and one of the areas where I felt like the 66 was less impressive than it could have been. I thought the new Kowa 66 was going to be lighter than it ended up being, and I didn't feel it sat as competitively in the marketplace as it could have had it retained a greater weight superiority. 5 ounces is a significant amount of weight. Like, we're talking over quarter of a pound. It is close to, I want to say 16-17% lighter than the Swaro ATC. Now, if we go to minimum focus distance, 9.2 feet with the 55A, 9.8 feet with the 553, and 11.2 feet with the ATC. I share this to give you the information, but to be quite honest with you, it is really not that helpful as it's a spotting scope, and we don't tend to be looking at things 10 feet away. Now, the next thing we should probably mention is size. So the Kowa comes in at 10 inches long, and the Swaro comes in at 10.2 inches long. However, I think where the Swaro really stands apart is in how streamlined the design is. So let's talk a little bit about these focusing knobs, because that and the ergonomics and the kind of form factor all go hand in hand. And again, we're really talking about trade-offs, and you need to decide what is more important for you. So the Swaro, I would argue, is more packable because there's nothing hanging off of it. These double barrel focus knobs always get me slightly nervous because I feel like when I'm putting it in my pack or pulling it out of my pack, I'm risking catching something on here and pulling on these and applying an undue amount of pressure. However, by taking the focus off of the barrel and by giving you coarse and fine adjustment, it allows you to adjust focus without getting the associated handshake. One of the problems with spotting scopes is that while you are turning the focus knob, you're kind of slightly shaking the barrel. So you can't tell if you're in focus until you remove your hand. And so you have to shift it a little bit, move your hand, shift it a little bit, move your hand until you really dial it in. That's not how things are with the Kowa. Because it's off barrel and because you have coarse and fine, it is such a small movement back and forth with these that it doesn't introduce the same handshake. So that really plays in. They've made a compromise to give you a slightly less sleek form factor, but a greater degree of functionality in the focusing. Now, before I get into my conclusions, I want you to know I have a 3-way battle on the way. So as I mentioned, this was an initial impressions video. I am currently working that I wanted to get out now because this thing's brand new. Everybody's kind of pinging me, asking me what my thoughts are on it. I have some initial thoughts, but I haven't had a chance to test them out yet. So for those early adopters, I'm going to give you the initial impressions video, but then I'm working on a three-way battle, and I'm going to compare the ATC, the 55A, and the new Vortex Mini, because I think we can have a really interesting conversation about value at that point. Like, is it really worth twice the money to get into the Kowa or the Swaro over the Vortex? I don't know what the answer is to that, but that video is coming, and I will give you a kind of deeper technical analysis of the Kowa and the Swaro at that time. But for now, I wanted to get this initial video out, and I will say what I typically say, because I've had Kowas and Swaros in the same categories multiple times, and it's kind of the same conclusion every time. If you are somebody who wants the best optical experience whatsoever, I think you should probably buy the Kowa. But recognize you're making some compromises. Aesthetically, it's not as nice. This to me looks like a first gen Vortex spotting scope. I think it's ugly. And when you're spending $2,500 on something, I do think it should be beautiful. I think it can work and be functional and be beautiful at the same time. The Swaro ATC is a work of art. Like, you look at it and you hold it and you're like, this thing is beautiful. This ain't. But it does have the best crystal. Now, it's also not the sleekest package. The Swaro packs up a little bit better. So if packing up tighter and worrying less about these focus knobs is more of importance to you, you probably want to go with the Swaro. However, if you want the dual focus ability and keeping that handshake off the barrel and the actual like user experience is most important to you, you probably want the Kowa. Now, the last thing that I will say, and I do think this deserves saying, the used marketplace for optics is very busy. Like, there's always a lot of used optics for sale. I will tell you that nothing is easier on the planet than selling Swaro glass. As long as you're willing to take a little hit, like a 10, 15% hit, you can move Swaro glass. So if you're on the fence about getting into a spotting scope, the Swaro will move quicker on a used marketplace than the Kowa. However, and I know I'm flip-flopping, and the reason I'm going back and forth is that there is no clear-cut answer. One of these is not definitively better than the other. And maybe once I do my field-tested review, I will have the ability to give you that clarity, but I don't at this point. So that's why I'm doing all of these initial impressions video with the caveat that these are my kind of intuitions and assumptions based on what I know of these two companies and the products that I've looked at historically. If you know you want a 55 mil spotter, like a mini spotter in your gear locker, and you know that the viewing clarity is the single most important thing to you, you're saving some money going with the Kowa. It is an incredible piece of machinery. Like, you're never going to regret having this thing. Yeah, there's a couple things I don't like about it. But when you come to the actual performance of the product, it's really hard to critique. So there you go. If you were interested in my initial thoughts on the new Kowa TSN-55A, now you have it. If you could do me a favor, like, comment, share, subscribe, I would greatly appreciate it. It helps grow the channel. If you're interested in participating in a community where we dive into this type of detail on a regular basis, mindful-reviews.com. And as always, thank you for tuning in.